The Texas justice system is messy, so let's break it down. You're listening to So You Got Arrested, the podcast that tells you what really happens after an arrest. Hosted by BRIC criminal defense attorneys, we talk to the people who've lived it, worked in it, and been shaped by it. Whether you're facing charges or just want to understand your rights, your options, and the smart moves that could change everything, we've got your back.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Scott Simpson here for BRIC, and I know you're used to seeing Stephen Barrera here. We miss Stephen. There's a lot going on with us moving offices in the beginning of the new year, so Stephen wasn't able to make it. So he was our great play-by-play man, so you're going to have to just stick with the color guy today. It's great to have you. I hope everybody had great holidays. As part of our continuing effort to ask we've never had this many candidates running for DA in Bexar County, not even close.
No.
And so there's 8 candidates in the Democratic primary, just one in the Republican?
Yes.
And then possibly one independent.
Correct.
Okay. So we're reaching out to everybody to see if they'd like to come on. And today we have the privilege of having Meredith Chacon here with us. We were prosecutors together under both Nico LaHood and Susan Reed.
Yes.
And so with that, I'd like to introduce Meredith and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Thanks, Scott. So my name is Meredith Chacon, and I'm running for Bexar County District Attorney in the Democratic primary. I was at the DA's office for a little over 18 years. I'm the only candidate who was there as a support staff person. I was there as a victim advocate before I went to law school. Then I went to law school and I came back as a paid intern in the felony criminal trial division. And then I was hired as soon as I passed the bar in May of 2003. And I worked there for 15 years as a prosecutor. The bulk of that time I spent in what we used to call the Family Justice Unit. I think it's now referred to as family violence, where I mainly prosecuted child abuse cases, domestic violence cases, and I did human trafficking cases as well. After I left the DA's office, I went to work for Child Safe at our Child's Advocacy Center here in San Antonio, where I developed the multidisciplinary team and statewide forensic interviewing techniques. And in 2020, me and a couple of other prosecutors who had left the office started a defense practice and family law practice, and I also do child welfare law.
Now, when you were under Nico, you started supervising the CPS attorneys.
Yes. So I spent a period of time in the CPS unit as a line prosecutor. And then when Nico LaHood was the DA, I was put in a position where I supervised the unit. I had to write the budget to expand the unit. I wrote a $2 million budget, pitched it to the commissioners, organized and coordinated a contract with Harris County to purchase a computer system to better manage our cases. And I grew the unit to 38 people at the time that I had left.
Yeah, there was a big change when you took over that unit. It was kind of used to be. This was just my opinion, but it used to be kind of like the poor stepchild one, and you gave it a lot of resources.
Yes, it really was. I remember when I applied for early promotion into that unit, people in the criminal side were kind of like, "What is she doing?" And it was.
I was one of them. I was like, why you want to go over to there? I was like, what?
I just really have a heart for child welfare, and I do the docket now, and I wanted to be a part of that. It was a fascinating time, and it was really actually a very. It built my skills as a cross-examiner better than any other court experience I've had, because you could literally call the person to the stand, unlike in criminal cases. Right. So oftentimes my first witness would be the abusive parent, and I just drill into them.
And unfortunately, a lot of times the defense attorneys on a lot of times on those cases, there's criminal cases running along parallel, but nobody bothers to tell the criminal defense attorney that their client's in this CPS hearing. Yeah. I used to make an effort, I'm sure you do too, to go to them when that happens. But it's so when you were head of that, I was kind of head of the criminal side, running the family violence or victim protection unit. So we kind of worked hand in hand.
Yes. Yeah. And that was what was different back then. And that's one of the reasons that I am running, is that there is a disconnect right now. They have, in my opinion, the current administration and anybody who works for them, that's just going to be 2.0, have created what they consider to be a Chinese wall around that unit. They prevent there from being communication. So I personally have represented children who are victims of child sexual abuse, whose cases were either dismissed or not indicted because they lost track of the victim, who, by the way, was in foster care, who their office also represents. So that's a problem.
I didn't know that was happening.
Oh, yes.
So who runs the CPS unit for the DA's office now? Do you know? Is it Kimberly?
It is under the it was under the child abuse under Melly Powers.
Right.
But I believe they put whoever the deputy chief was, they may have promoted him. I don't know what their organizational structure is at this point. But
so they're not communicating with each other.
They are not. I've also had cases where I represented a non-offending father who the mother had been charged with a child abandonment. It was a very serious child abandonment case. A young child was left alone in an HEB and she disappeared. And they didn't bring the case. They didn't indict the case, even though the CPS case was pending over a year until after we resolved the CPS case. And so they couldn't use it against her in the CPS case. It caused a whole thing. Child was later abducted from Georgia, and I pro bono, because at that point I was no longer paid to represent the man, stepped in and got an emergency order from the judge and was able to coordinate, to get the child back to his father. But that would have never happened had they been following the case where their child was a victim. And I think that was an important thing you and I worked on very hard that needs to be brought back.
And it's never simple. I used to be over the protective order people too. And I would tell my that's always an entry level misdemeanor prosecutor. And I would say, if there's a criminal case pending, make sure, and it's a felony, reach out to the felony prosecutor. And a lot of times the felony prosecutors wouldn't respond. And I'm like, okay, well, we gave them a chance. Yeah. So it is always difficult sometimes getting everybody, because let's face it, everybody at the DA's office is busy.
Sure.
But you have to strive for that, right?
Oh, yes.
So what are your thoughts in terms of as a candidate for DA and somebody who's been in the DA's office, what would you look to do to help all that communication work better?
Well, I think there has to be an expectation that they communicate, because if there's not, and there's no consequence if they don't, then why would they? So that would be the first thing, is there would be an expectation in my administration that everybody's going to communicate with one another. I mean, they have the resources to do it. They have the computer system to put the notes to be.
They're all in the same building.
They're all in the same. I mean, it's crazy when I'm the ad litem and I'm the one calling SAPD to find out what the status of my kid's case is. That shouldn't happen. I think that's one. I think there needs to be a restructure. I think the office has been in this same structure probably more or less since the 90s. They may have renamed units, but it's been the same. And I think that we need to look at larger DA's offices, because we are a large DA's office, such as Harris County, Tarrant County, Dallas County, and even counties outside of Texas, at a better way to structure things and a better way to intake cases. Because I think right now, they're driven by numbers. They're constantly talking about the backlog. What is the backlog and what that really means? And I think they need to be more victim-centered than number-centered, and also realize what we were taught was you're probably going to reject more cases than you actually indict if we're doing this right, because the justice center's system's kind of like a funnel, like lots of calls.
You don't just indict everything and let the prosecutors in court work it out.
Right. That's very, very important. And if you're not willing to try a case, you better not indict it. That was the rule we had back when I was with you.
Yeah. And I have seen where people, there's people get mad, like, you indicted this thing, you come down and try it, which sometimes isn't the best way to do it. But yeah, so like, for instance, I always found it interesting when I was teaching at the different prosecutor schools, like Dallas County has a unit just for child victims, but sex crimes and family violence are not part. It's just a child victim unit. Sure. Right. So I have seen different counties do it. Whereas in Bexar, we've always taken family violence, adult sex crimes, all child victim crimes. They're all together. So that unit is covering a lot of the most important cases of the community. Yeah. So what are your thoughts about that?
I do think that while I think they all need to communicate, because those can overlap, right? Child abuse can be related to domestic violence and but I think you're right. I think that child cases need to be kind of severed out, and then domestic violence needs to be its own area. And I don't know if those would be divisions or what we would call that, but they need to be a little bit separate, because there's different skills that you learn with those things and different ways that you prepare those cases. And the caseload has just become too great to be an expert in everything.
So let's talk about that for a minute, because when Nico first came in, he took all the family violence cases and put them out into trial division. Remember?
Yes.
Okay. And I don't think that's a bad idea. It's just that the person who was head of trial division wasn't real keen on it. And then the trial division didn't really want to handle those. And then we ended up taking them all back.
Right.
But I don't think it's a bad idea, but it has to be promoted from the top. It was like, it was done and the people that were getting it weren't real pleased with the idea. So because I'm not sure you need a separate division for family violence. Sure. They're just assaults with family members. I mean, if you know how to try an assault, you can try a family violence case. What do you think?
I think that might be something to consider, and I agree. It wasn't the implementation wasn't there.
Correct. It wasn't a bad idea.
No, the buy-in wasn't there, and I think some of that is you really You have to be a leader who says, this is my expectation. And if you're not on board, I know we have a lot of openings, but if you're not on board, you're not on board. There was always a competitive spirit, if you will, the nice way of saying it, between criminal trial division and family justice. I was fortunate that I was assigned the courts that I was assigned to. We worked well with our criminal trial division partners, but it wasn't always that way in every court. And so I think there's room for something like that, especially at the third degree level kind of offenses, because it spreads the work out to where there's more prosecutors. Well,
so both of us were early on in the process. Judge Renhel was thinking about running, and we were talking to him about it, and he decided he wasn't going to run.
Right.
But I told him at the time, the head of criminal trial division and the head of family violence need to be good friends. Right?
Yeah.
Because they've never been really. You've never seen them be tight.
Yeah.
Because those two divisions determine the success of the DA's office.
I mean, I've seen them argue over whose stapler it is in court.
I know. And so whoever, because if you become the DA, will you commit to make sure that those two people like each other?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. That would be helpful.
I think that has to happen.
Because some of the pettiness that you're talking about is because it's not that they were enemies, the different heads of the division. It's just they weren't particularly they're busy. Mm-hmm. They didn't spend much time interacting or grabbing lunch once a week or things like that.
Yeah.
And that's how you build teamwork and camaraderie, is like, let's you and me grab lunch. Right? That's the Presbyterian way. We settle everything through committee. We all have lunch together.
Methodists are very much that way as well.
We are. We use the same.
We bring a casserole.
Yes, we do.
That's funny.
All right. So I'm going to ask you the hard question now.
Okay. Let me get some water.
All right. So you've run as a Republican before. And so the question that Democrats are going to ask in a primary, so why should we vote you as a Democrat when you run as a Republican?
Well, I think it's important to note that the easy answer to that is to say Donald Trump. I mean, I cannot identify with a party that has that particular individual as their leader. I realized when I ran last time that it had already begun to swing far too right for what I was comfortable with. And over the last 4 years, I haven't been involved at all with the Republican Party. When Judge Renhel, before Judge Renhel was potentially thinking about it, I had been approached by many people to run as a Democrat. I had talked to people about that. I'd really made a move towards being more identified as a Democrat. I've donated to Democratic campaigns. I've signed their petitions. And so I was really struggling with that. How do I do that? Because, I even went and read the whole platform one night, just to see.
Okay.
And I
in the Texas?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And what I found was, as a moderate, and I'm a moderate, I'm not hiding behind that. It's a party I can more identify with at this point, because I think there's more room for different voices in the Democratic Party than there are in the Republican Party. If you're a Republican and you don't follow lockstep what you're told to follow as a Trumper, then you're not really a Republican. You're a rhino, or you're kicked out, or you're primaried.
It always pisses me off, that rhino thing. Like, who are you to decide what that has to believe? And so as an East Coast liberal guy, but I've also been, I get resentful about the idea that Democrats are weak on crime, because a lot of the people who are in the family violence unit, because we're empathetic to women and children and their plight sometimes. In other words, just because you're an illegal immigrant doesn't mean somebody can commit a crime against you.
Well, I'm glad you said that about Democrats, because I don't think that Democrats inherently are weak on crime. And I think that's a thing that's thrown at them that I don't think is fair. I think there has in the past few years, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, been some Democratic groups that were far lefter of that, but that doesn't mean they're weak on the crimes that I think you need to be tough on. I don't think anybody's weak on who hurts kids, who hurts the people that can't protect themselves. I think weak on crime kind of came more from the restorative justice things, which what's funny is, as prosecutors, we're all for restorative justice.
There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes people get like this, something gets pigeonholed as a bad thing, instead of, look, we're just trying to make sure people don't reoffend, and we don't send them to prison. They come out with the same damn thing that's going on.
Well, yeah. And I'm I'm the defense attorney for the Esperanza Court, which, as you know, human trafficking is dear to my heart. And these are people who've been victims of trafficking, who have mental health issues, unresolved trauma, and drug addiction issues. And those specialty courts are really important.
Yeah.
I think they do good work. And I think that we need to work more programs like that and more interventions on the front end, utilize pretrial diversion more broadly, utilize cite and release more broadly. I'm for all of those things. And wow, that's a Democrat.
Right.
And then for those who would say it's easy to jump into it's easier to win as a Democrat, I would say I'm in an 8-way primary. This is in no way easier than it would have been to go over on the other side, because I truly believe the DA's race could go either way.
Well, it's going to be a cluster with 8 candidates.
Sure.
I mean, nobody's going to get 50% of the vote. So there's going to be the top 2 candidates will come out in the runoff, and Lord knows what happens in a runoff.
Well, statistically, that may be true, but I still would hope that I could get 51% of the vote.
Okay, there you go. There you go.
I mean, I think I'm the most qualified candidate by far. I have a plan as to what to do on day one. I have the connections with law enforcement and the history of building teams with law enforcement to make sure that we do the best practices for investigation and prosecution of these most heinous cases. So.
Well, to that end, I know that there's concerns that you have about some of the statistics that are going on in the DA's office. Can you speak to some of that?
Yes. So when one looks to look at what the statistics are, the place to look is the Office of Court Administration, because that's where the numbers are compiled by the courts and by they're sent in there and they're published. They're public on their website, so you can run these reports yourself. So I looked at 2024. The year from January 1st to December 31st of 2024, because I feel like they may not have turned in all the 25 numbers yet.
Yeah,
We're very early in the year. So just on misdemeanor family violence cases, because I know we don't have all day to talk about this, but on misdemeanor family violence cases, they dismissed 1,934 cases in 2024. That was 61% of the cases.
Okay.
That's a 61% dismissal rate.
Now, let me ask you, so what's your thoughts about how much of that is because police are just filing everything instead of using any discretion?
Well, so it's interesting. They're not very successful at trial. So when I look at their trial conviction rate, they're at 17% conviction rate at trial. All right, they had 7 guilties by a jury and 30 not guilties by a jury.
And so these are misdemeanor family violence?
Misdemeanor family violence.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so I think the thing about the dismissal rate that's alarming to me is just that it's more than what they took in. I mean, if they're not able to try a case, okay, so the narrative that's being sold is that they've pushed through this backlog of cases that were in intake.
Right.
And what I would say is, if at the other side of that, you've just pushed through a bunch of crap cases, then you are leaving your prosecutors with crap cases to try that either have to be dismissed or and then you have to look at, why are they losing cases that they're taking to trial? Are they not well trained? Are they not well supported? Which I think is what's happening. And
there's probably an extent they're trying crappy cases,
right?
Too,
and
instead
then
of exercising discretion. My sense is they don't feel like they have the ability to say, this case I can't prove, I'm going to dismiss it.
They absolutely don't have discretion, which is crazy, because then you're dismissing 1,934 cases, which means at the last day you're deciding you can't prove it. Also, and I know you've heard this, we go to these family violence impact, the family violence courts, and over again, a case is getting reset because they've had no contact with their victim. And I don't understand that as a former victim advocate. There should never be a day you come to court, and if you haven't had contact with your victim, you better be ready to dismiss that case if it's set for trial, because we should have had contact with them. And we haven't. There's investigators and people that can do that, and there's plenty of staff to do that. I disagree that they don't have the ability to do that. They're just not allocating the support staff and giving the support staff enough support to do that job. And they have far more advocates than they had when you or I were there.
Oh yeah, they do. They have it quite a bit.
And then they have.
We didn't have misdemeanor advocates.
No.
Am I right?
We might have had one.
I don't remember. I think I had to do all the contact. We had one misdemeanor investigator for sure to help me track people down.
Yeah.
But I don't remember. I think later at the end of Nico's, maybe we got a misdemeanor.
Maybe there was. And so I think that there's just things are not allocated properly. The resources are not being, because you can see when you go to court and they haven't talked to them, and they don't have any notes. Nobody's, they're not figuring out what they need to do and doing it the right way to talk to victims.
But I do want to say that in my interactions with a lot of the misdemeanor prosecutors, I do think they have a lot of good young talent there.
I do. I think there are some. What I'm hearing from them when I go in is they're very frustrated that they either have no discretion to do what they think is right on a case. Like, they'll say, I agree with you, this is not a good case, or your girl's actually the victim and she should have been charged, but I'm not allowed to dismiss this. And then the other thing I'm hearing is they don't know they can't get a hold of anybody to talk to them about what they can do. There's not.
Got it.
There was a mentorship aspect to being a prosecutor when I first started that I think we need to bring back. I mean, you were very good at mentoring young prosecutors. Kirsten Melton was very good at mentoring young prosecutors. I tried to mentor young prosecutors, and Mary Green mentored me.
Yeah, she
great. Poured into me. And so I think that needs to happen. And again, that's an expectation that needs to be set.
And one of the things we had under Nico, we did have a regular training classes.
Sure.
Was it every other Friday? I know I spoke at a few of them.
I did several of them. I believe it was every other Friday. And
we did one set for a while, like a group for the misdemeanor people.
Sure.
And then when that was done, we did a group for the new felony third chairs.
Yeah.
And so I don't know why they did away with that, because that was a good program.
Well, and I think in-house training is great. I think, like I said, mentoring people is great. Even if having sister courts, I think was a great thing.
Yeah, I like sister courts.
That was really important. I used Charles Bunk was my first.
Oh, really?
And I was in county court too. And if I had a case I needed to review, I knew I could go to Charles and review it. And he had an open door. And I think if first chairs aren't willing to have that open door, again, it's about expectations. My expectation is we're all going to work as a team. Right. We're all going to, and I think there's a camaraderie that's missing. The day I filed, I went over to court to take care of business. And there was a prosecutor, a first chair, that took me out in the hall, and they broke down in tears. And they said, I was ready to leave until I heard the news that you filed this morning. And I'm willing to hang on.
Oh, yeah.
Because we need somebody who understands what we're going through. And that broke my heart, but it also encouraged me that, I feel like I'll get their vote.
So are you a believer in the sister court system?
I am a believer in the sister court system.
Can you explain a little bit what that means?
So when I'm talking about sister courts, the felony prosecutors that are assigned to, say, I think it was the 187th at the time, was sister courts with county court too, when I was a young prosecutor. And so that meant that I knew my chain of command, if you will. If I had an issue or I wanted to review a case for dismissal, because there were cases we were not allowed to dismiss even back then without review, then I would go to my felony first chair and review it with them, and they would question me about it. And it was a learning experience too, about how to analyze a case and which cases were worth proceeding and which weren't. And so they also would come and help me when I needed help. I remember my second chair sat with me on my first motion to suppress that I did and helped me work out how to do that. And that made me much more confident.
Now, because the new administration did away with, they have a chief of misdemeanor and a deputy chief of misdemeanor. So they don't really, the misdemeanor people don't really interact with any of the felony prosecutors. They're interacting with their chief and deputy chief. That's
what it appears. And I think that kind of started a little under Nico. He'd kind of developed that. And I didn't agree with necessarily that part of it. Because when I go to court, both on the felony and I'll say, well, this guy has a misdemeanor pending in such and such court. Can you let the misdemeanor prosecutors know we've made a deal? No, you got to go talk to them. I don't talk to them. Or vice versa. I'll tell the misdemeanor prosecutor, this person had a felony. He's pleading on the felony. Can we do something with this misdemeanor? Oh, I don't have authority to do that. Well, can you just call the first chair? Oh, no, they so there's it's a constant lack of communication.
Because back in our day, and now I sound like the old man, back in my day, like people like Bill Pennington.
Yeah.
He would always love to talk to the misdemeanor prosecutors. And so the misdemeanor prosecutors would just go to the first chair in their sister court, and they would talk to him kind of regularly.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I know the one problem with that system is if you have a first chair that doesn't like talking to younger people, then we probably need to move them somewhere else.
So that goes back to expectations.
Yes, it does. It goes back to, but so I think that they had like a regular input with somebody so experienced like Bill was, or yourself was, or I was, that we've tried a whole bunch of things.
Yeah.
And we would just tell you, I don't think you can prove that case or whatever. But now I know what I did whenever, and even when the felony prosecutors would come to me and say, like, I want to talk to you about this case, is this and this, I would always say, what do you want to do? I want to hear your judgment first before I just tell you what I think. How do you feel about that?
Oh, no, I think that's a good idea. You want, what are you coming at me with? And I've even asked prosecutors when they're going to go, well, I've got to go talk to my chief. I'm like, how are you going to sell this to your chief before you go? Because you do need to know where they're coming from first. And I think then if you don't agree with where they're coming from after they give you their spiel, then that's when you can kind of teach and correct and navigate it. But yeah, that's a good question to ask.
An unnamed prosecutor that we all worked with was famous for coming to our staff meetings and saying, "Oh, there's all this problems, this case, this, and this, and this, and this." And I'm like, "Well, just go ahead and dismiss it." "Oh no, I don't want to dismiss it like this." I said, "What do you want to do? Try it right here in the conference room?" I mean, you got to just make a decision one way or the other. You got to make a decision.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we have about 6 minutes left. And I told you with 5 minutes left, I would turn it over and tell you, what is it that you haven't had a chance to say that you want the voters of Bexar County to know as they're coming up to this election, the first Tuesday in March?
Well, I think the voters need to know this is a very important election for Bexar County. And I know a lot of people don't want to get out and vote in a primary. We have low voter turnout overall in primaries. There are people who don't want to identify themselves as either Republican or Democrat. And what I would say to you is you need to research the candidates and decide who's the most qualified, because Bexar County is in a bad way right now with regards to how the criminal justice system is being handled by this DA's office. And that's because we've had 8 years of someone that was not leading this office from in my opinion, a perspective that was to be for the best of Bexar County and to fulfill that oath to see that justice is done. And I would tell you that I believe I'm the best candidate in any of the party, whether that be Republican, Democrat, Independent. Of all of them, I'm the most qualified. I've had administration experience. I've had statewide team building experience. I've trained people. I've across the state, as Scott mentioned, with TDCAA, and I have tried cases. I've tried hard cases. I'm not afraid to take on who I need to take on. And more importantly, you're going to get transparency from me that you won't get, I think, from anyone else, because it's a hard job and you have to have a thick skin. And I'm not always going to do everything that everybody's going to agree with. There are 2 million people or something in Bexar County. So you may not agree with what I decide to do, but you will always know why I did it and why I believed it was the thing that we needed to do to make sure that justice was done. And that's important. Being
the prosecutor in a big city is probably the hardest job out there, because no matter, and you can't go into it trying to make everybody happy.
Exactly.
Because if you try to make everybody happy, you're gonna make everybody unhappy.
Yes.
And so I would say to the voters, and when you guys go out to vote in March, I would say, my opinion, I don't know if you agree with this or not, the DA is probably the elected official that has the most to do with your daily lives. More than a senator in the state of Texas, more than the president of the United States, the person that has most elected office that has most impact on your community here in Bexar County, I would argue, is the district attorney. Am I crazy when I say that?
No, I think you're absolutely right. So if you're displeased by how the police are behaving, if that's how you feel, then you need a DA that you know is going to get in there and work with them and train them and hold them accountable, but work with them. If you're someone who feels like we're not being tough enough on crime in Bexar County, and I'm one of those people, then you need me. You need someone who's going to hold child abusers and domestic violence and human traffickers accountable. If you're worried that people who have addiction and substance abuse issues are not being treated properly, I'm your candidate. I've represented those people in children's court and in criminal court, and I understand the importance of treatment and making sure that we utilize the system to best help those people. But it is so important because it's going to touch everyone. Everybody knows somebody who's either been a victim of domestic violence or been involved in it in some way. You love somebody who has been, or you've been yourself. And that really should be the most important thing in this race. And I think that I have the unique qualifications and the successful proven outcomes that I've gotten in my cases and in my career in team building. So
I do want to follow up with that, in that, so it's important. A prosecutor's duty is to see that justice is done.
Absolutely.
Okay. So everybody, all the citizens always want to say, we need to be tougher on crime, give people higher sentences, until it's one of their loved ones that's charged.
Right.
When I first left the DA's office under Susan Reed, a lot of the people that I got hired on were relatives of SAPD people. Mm-hmm. Right. And so everybody wants everybody to throw the book at it until it's your loved one. But what we have to understand as prosecutors is that's somebody's loved one. So when we talk about seeing that justice is done, it's not just justice for the victim and justice for the community. You have to treat the accused justly too.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I think we lose that in it's easy to lose in the social media environment of today.
Oh, yeah. Well, somebody interviewed me the other day. I said, we need to get off our phones. But yeah, I think that is important. You have to treat people with dignity. And during the brief time that I was a magistrate judge and I was setting bonds for people, you're there at the jail and they're bringing in people in their handcuffs and you're reading them their rights and you're setting their bond. And I remember the public defender came up to me after my second shift by myself and she said, "You're so kind when you deal with them. And I said, look, there's no point riling somebody up, number one. And number two, these people are having the worst day they've ever had. You know, they're on their worst day. I don't need to make it worse. I'm just there to do two things, read them their rights and set them their bond. I'm not going to do anything on their case today. So there's no point getting ugly. And I think you have to remember that as a prosecutor, these are human beings you're dealing with, and we can punish harshly those who harm the vulnerable, and that's fine. But you still have to treat people with dignity. And especially when you're dealing with the defense attorney, treat them well. They're not the ones that committed the crime. They're there doing
most defense attorneys. Some defense attorneys are jerks.
Sure. I did send one to prison for 80 years. But,
That's right. I forgot about that. Okay.
But yeah.
Okay, so on that note, we really appreciate you coming down here, and good luck in March. And thank you all for joining us. Take everything seriously when the elections are coming up in a month and a half.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to So You Got Arrested. If you found this podcast helpful, share it with someone who needs to hear it. For more legal insights and real talk from the front lines of the Texas justice system, follow us and subscribe. And remember, Brick Criminal Defense has your back. For more information, visit us at brckdefense.com.